Okay, hello Year 12 and welcome to the second lesson on natural law. This lesson will be slightly shorter than the first one. I've just divided it into two separate videos because I don't really want videos to go on for longer than around an hour. So in this presentation, we're going to be looking at the following things. The idea of double effect in natural law, application of natural law to euthanasia, criticisms of natural law, and then finally looking at an essay as well. Okay, so let's have a quick summary of what we learned in the last lesson. So natural law is based on Aristotle's idea that all of nature is aiming to fulfill its natural law. All things are moving from potentiality to actuality and aiming to fulfill their natural law or telos. Telos means end goal. Aquinas was inspired by Aristotle. Unlike Aristotle, Aquinas was a Christian, therefore natural law is a Christian ethical theory. Aquinas changes the final telos of human life from Aristotle's eudaimonia to the Christian imago Dei. The purpose of life is to fulfill our natural law, which is to live in the image that our Creator has designed for us. Natural law is therefore a normative theory, as it tells us what we ought to do in order to fulfill our natural law. It is also deontological, because in reality, the Catholic Church issues a set of absolutist, unbreakable laws which all must follow. Okay, and then we have an AO2 introduction in the red here. So this is how the opening paragraph for any essay on natural law would look. A quick summary of the basic ideas, and then a introduction to the overall argument that you're going to be forwarding. Okay, the next paragraph in an essay needs to explain casuistry. Casuistry. So casuistry we looked at last lesson is the process of working out good and bad actions based on reason and exploring our natural moral law. So what we do, we just go back to the slide from last lesson, is we just go backwards. Okay, this is our ultimate telos for Aquinas. To do that, we need to do this. To do that, we need to do this. Discover this through this by using this and avoiding this. Okay. So, all humans, in order to reach the imago Dei, should fulfill the principle of synderesis. This is to do good and avoid evil. In order to do this, we must fulfill our primary precepts, which are worship God, live in an orderly society, reproduce, learn, and defend the self and the innocent. In order to fulfill primary precepts, we must first work out secondary precepts, which are known as principles of action. This is a process known as casuistry. Therefore, in order to fulfill the primary precept reproduce, we must not wear condoms. So it's always good to give an example. So condoms prevent reproduction. The final cause of sexual intimacy should be reproduction, not pleasure. In order to make this decision, we must first decide to chase the real good of reproduction rather than the apparent good of sexual pleasure. We make this decision by reasoning correctly. We reason correctly by following the virtues and avoiding the vices. For example, if we followed the vice of lust, we would not be fulfilling our natural law, as we would wish to use a condom before marriage. If we followed the virtue of temperance or self-control, we would be fulfilling our natural law. So really, this paragraph and the paragraph before are all that you really need to mention. The basic ideas behind natural law, and the rest will just be criticisms. Okay, now you might get asked a question applying natural law to euthanasia, and you might get asked a question about double effect. So that's what we need to look at next. So, for Aquinas, what is the ultimate purpose of human life? fulfill God's purpose for our life. And it can be done by fulfilling the primary precepts. And our acronym for that is WORLD. So if a dog was trying to reproduce with someone's leg, would it be doing its job properly? No. Why not? Because the purpose of its sexual desires are to create new dogs. And this is the same for humans. For human beings, our actions are only good if they're helping us to fulfill the primary precepts. So sex will only be good if it leads to reproduction, for example. So there becomes a problem though, and that's when an action fulfills one primary precept but goes against another. And that's what we're going to look at now. So the first thing is some definitions. Aquinas actually talks about two different kinds of acts. Exterior acts, which is the actual action. So let's say if you go to church, walking into church and praying is the exterior act. Interior act is the motive, the intention. Why are you doing it? And they're both important. So I'll give you an example. Let's say you're helping an old lady cross the road. This is a good action. Why? Well, because it's helping you to fulfill one of the primary precepts, which is live in an orderly society. Or you could argue it's helping you to defend self and the innocent, defend people. So this is a good action. You're helping an old lady cross the road. However, the interior act or the motive might be for a bad reason. You might be doing it because you want to look good. Or you might be doing it because your friend on the other side of the street is about to mug the old lady and you're going to steal her money. So it really all depends, in which case it's a bad action. So helping lady across the road, that's the exterior act. So that you look good is the interior act. Helping the lady cross the road might be a good thing, but so that you look good is not a good thing. Stealing from people to help the poor. Well, here you could argue this is a bad exterior act, but a good interior act. The motive is good, even if the action is bad. And the best thing, obviously, the best kind of action for Aquinas is going to be a good exterior act with a good interior act. So you're doing something good and you're doing it with a good motive or intention as well. Okay, so this should help us understand the doctrine of double effect. Doctrine just means the teaching. Now, there's a problem with natural law. What if an action has two possible effects? One that's good and one that's bad. Should you do the action or not? And here's a good example. What would natural law tell you to do in the fat man example? Because on the one hand, you're pushing the fat man off the bridge, which isn't defending the innocent. And on the other hand, if you don't push the fat man off the bridge, you're not defending the innocent people on the track. So there's a problem. And Aquinas recognizes that this is a problem. The theory is in danger of not being normative anymore because it doesn't tell you what you ought to do in tricky situations. So Aquinas invents the theory of double effects. This is when one action has two effects. With double effect, the action is no longer bad, even if it leads to bad consequences. because the intended consequence or interior action is good. So we're going to look at this now. You may not always know what the result of your actions will be. You're therefore only responsible for the immediate consequences of your action, not for any secondary unintended effects. This is called the law of double effect. It's a set of ethical criteria for evaluating the permissibility of acting when one's otherwise legitimate acts will also cause an effect one would normally be obliged to avoid. And this is all quite complex, okay? And I don't expect you to understand it yet. The best way to understand it is through examples. Okay, so this set of criteria states that an action having foreseen harmful effects practically inseparable from the good effects is justifiable. If the nature of the act itself is good, the agent intends the good effect, and the good effect outweighs the bad effect. So let's look at some examples then. Let's say a woman suffers from painful or irregular periods, and a doctor prescribes contraceptive pills in order to regulate her cycle. Now, this is an action which has a good effect and a bad effect. The good effect is that it helps to reduce her pain. So we could say defends the innocent because she's in lots and lots of pain. The bad effect is it stops her reproducing. So natural law has a problem. If an action fulfills one primary precept but goes against another, is it permissible to perform the action? Because the action has two effects, double effects. If he takes a contraceptive pill and one effect is good, defends her, one effect is bad, prevents her from reproducing. So the fact that the hormone in the pills acts as a contraceptive is a secondary effect. So you've got to look at the intention. Why is the woman taking the pill? And the woman is taking the pill not to stop reproduction, but to defend herself from pain and illness. The doctor is right in his prescription, so this is allowed because it has the intended effect of regulating the cycle and relieving discomfort. The intention is important, the interior act. Euthanasia is another example. Let's imagine that someone's in lots and lots of pain and they want to die. So the doctor gives them medication which kills them. What's the intention here? Well, the intention isn't to kill, which is a bad effect because that goes against defend self and the innocent. The intention is to relieve pain. So maybe double effect would allow this, as long as the intention is good. And there are actually 4 steps. There are 4 steps, a bit like the hedonic calculus, that you need to go through to work out whether an action is acceptable or not when it has double effect. So double effect is used then when there is an action that might cause a bad outcome as well as a good. Let's go through the examples. First of all, the best way I think of remembering these conditions is the acronym IMGO. Intention, or IGMO. Intention, good, means, and outweigh. So let's go through these examples. We've got 2 examples here. They're both from euthanasia. So example number 1. Someone's in a lot of pain and you're giving someone drugs that they need to reduce the pain. Your intention is to reduce pain. However, there's a 50-50 chance that the drugs might also kill the patient because it's really strong medication. So what's the good outcome? Well, the good outcome is reducing pain. What's the bad outcome? Could lead to death. Double effect. So should the doctor still give the drugs? Well, the first thing we need to ask is, what's the intention? Is the intention to kill, or is the intention to reduce pain? Is the intention the good outcome or the bad outcome? But it turns out the intention is to reduce pain. So is there a good intention? Yes. So it passes that one. First condition of double effect, it passes. Next, is the good effect one of the 5 primary precepts? Is it actually one of worlds? And the answer to this is yes, because reducing pain defends the self and the innocent. Number 3, is the evil a means to obtain the good? That's quite complex. What that means is the bad outcome, the death, what is reducing the pain? I'll say that again. Is the death of the patient what is reducing the pain? The answer to that is no, it's not. The death is an accidental byproduct. What's reducing the pain is the drugs. Death is just an accidental, unfortunate side effect of reducing the pain. So is the evil a means to obtain the good? No. That means it passes. You want no for this one. For double effect to work, the evil can't be a means of obtaining the good. Finally, does the good outweigh the evil? So, does the good of reducing pain outweigh the evil of the patient potentially dying? Well, this is quite subjective and debatable. You could argue yes, because the patient was going to die anyway. So really, this depends on how you view it, but I would say yes. So what we're looking for a situation to pass double effect is yes, yes, no, yes. So this passes double effect, which means, according to natural law theory, it is natural and acceptable to give someone drugs that might have an unintended death as a result. And therefore, the Catholic Church says that it's okay to do this. Okay, let's look at another example of euthanasia. Let's imagine that someone's in pain and they want the drugs, but this time they want the drugs to kill them, to actually end their lives, because that's what will reduce the pain. Does this pass double effect? Well, first of all, what is the good outcome? The good outcome is if they're dead, there's no more pain. What is the bad outcome? Life is taken. Someone has been killed. So, condition 1, intention, interior act. What's the intention? Is the intention to kill, or is the intention to stop pain? Well, really, the intention is to stop suffering. The patient doesn't want to die. The patient wants to end their suffering. It's just that the only way to do that is to die. So this does pass the first condition of double effect. Is the immediate effect good in itself, one of the 5 primary precepts? And you could argue yes, because it defends the innocent person from pain. Is the evil a means to obtain the good? Is taking the life what is causing the pain to end? Yes, it is. So it doesn't pass this condition. The bad outcome, ending life, is what is causing the good outcome. And for that reason, natural law doesn't allow it. Does the good way outweigh the evil? You could argue no, yes, it doesn't matter because it already has failed to pass double effect. So euthanasia won't be allowed by natural law when it's done for this reason, when it's done to end life on purpose. As an accidental byproduct, it might be okay, but euthanasia isn't allowed in the natural law tradition because of this condition. The bad outcome, killing, is being used for the good outcome, ending pain. So natural law and the Catholic Church doesn't allow this form of active euthanasia. Okay? So when you're writing about double effects, and we're going to look at a paragraph in a second which is going to explain it, this is the first thing you need to think about. What actually decides good or bad actions for Aquinas? And that is whether they're helping you to fulfill your natural law, whether it's helping you to fulfill the primary precepts, synderesis, and to live in the image of God. Part 2, what is the problem that double effect raises, or the problem that double effect is supposed to solve? Well, that is that sometimes the same action can have two effects, a good one and a bad one. And that's a problem because natural law needs to be able to explain and account for what we should do in those situations. And then part 3 should go through all 4 conditions of double effect, IGMO: intention, good, means, outcome. Okay, you can go through this with the example of the contraceptive pill or with the example of euthanasia. Okay, so here's my example. For Aquinas, actions are good or bad insofar as they help us achieve the human telos, which is to achieve the 5 precepts. These are the human functions that allow us to achieve the purpose God intended for us. Good actions are called subordinate precepts or secondary precepts, and are good because they help us fulfill a primary function. For example, helping others helps achieve the precept, live in an orderly society, so therefore is a good action and is a good secondary precept. The doctrine of double effect is Aquinas' attempt to make sense of when an action can potentially cause 2 different effects. One that helps us achieve our telos, and one that goes against our telos or purpose. The doctrine tries to make sense of whether we should perform this act or not. For example, someone may wish to help their loved one to die, known as euthanasia. This is clearly going against the 5th primary precept, defend the self and the innocent. However, the other effect of this action is that it will lead to reducing pain and therefore will be defending the self and the innocent. This will be helping you to achieve the precept defend the self and the innocent at the same time. Aquinas solves the problem by making the distinction between interior and exterior acts. Interior acts refer to a person's intention. Exterior is the action itself. For Aquinas, there are 4 conditions which will allow you to perform an action that has an unintended negative effect. Firstly, the interior act must be good. So the intention must be to achieve the positive effect and avoid the negative. Secondly, the immediate effect must be good in itself, one of the 5 precepts. Thirdly, the bad effect is a byproduct and not a means to achieve the good effects. Finally, the good effects must outweigh the bad. If all of these conditions are met, then the act is acceptable. This is the doctrine of double effect and would allow the woman to take the pill, for example. Okay, so this is the doctrine of double effects. Okay, so we're now on to some AO2. We've looked at some criticisms of natural law already at the beginning of the last video. We're now going to look at some more. Okay, so Thomas Hobbes. Thomas Hobbes criticizes the idea that human nature is good. So Aquinas thinks that human nature is good. And Hobbes has a different understanding of human nature, which seems to show that what we think of as natural seems to be subjective. So Hobbes says that human nature doesn't have an orientation towards the good. People are selfish and destructive. People are naturally bad. The life of man is nasty, brutish, and short. This is what Thomas Hobbes says. Okay, so that's a basic disagreement with Aquinas' optimistic idea of human nature. Hans Kung. He states that the idea of the natural is naive, narrow, and unhistorical. Naive means it's not very well thought through. It's a bit of an immature idea. Narrow means it's very basic. It's not really focused on the broad human experience. And unhistorical means that it doesn't really fit into history. So this is a little abstract, but what I think Hans Küng is saying is that when we say things are natural, that really just depends on when we're saying it. So we might say that it's natural to wear shoes because everyone wears shoes today. About 10,000 years ago, people didn't wear shoes, so that was natural back then. Today, we might say it's natural to go on holiday every year. 1,000 years ago, we'd say that it wasn't natural to go on holiday every year. So what is natural seems to change with history. That's what Hans Küng is saying. So that's disagreeing with Aquinas, because remember, Aquinas thinks that what is natural is true for all humans all of the time. It's an absolutist theory because we're all made in the image of God and we'll all have the same nature. Okay, Sartre, Russell, and Hume, three very different philosophers, but they say broadly the same thing, which is the idea that there just isn't a natural God-given purpose behind the universe. There is no meaning or nature behind things. There's no natural purpose to human life. We invent it. We decide what's natural, not God. Because these philosophers were atheists. They didn't believe in God. And finally, we have G.E. Moore, who we looked at already, which is very similar to Hume's is-ought distinction. It's a naturalistic fallacy. You can't say that because something is natural, that it should be done. So you could say it's natural for us to eat meat. That doesn't mean that we should do it. So Moore and Hume as well seem to be saying that just because something is identified as natural doesn't mean it should be done. Okay? So here are some AO2 questions, and I'm going to allow you, with your notes and with your OCR and my textbooks, to fill these in your own time. Does human nature have an orientation towards the good? It means, do humans try and be good? And you can use critics and you can use examples and discussions to plan this question. Next, can a judgment about something being good, bad, right, or wrong be based on its success or failure in achieving its telos? So this is criticizing the idea of everything having a purpose or a function or an ultimate goal, which Aristotle introduces. And we're going to touch on this more with the philosophy of religion unit. Has the universe as a whole been designed with a purpose? And finally, can the doctrine of double effect be used to justify an action, such as killing someone, as an act of self-defense? Okay, so we're going to finish off this short presentation with an essay. So, evaluate natural law as a method for moral decision making. The first few paragraphs we should recognize, but let's go through it now. So, natural law is based on Aristotle's idea that all of nature is aiming to fulfill its natural law. All things are moving from potentiality to actuality and aiming to fulfill their final cause or telos. Telos means end goal. Aquinas was inspired by Aristotle. Unlike Aristotle, Aquinas was a Christian, therefore natural law is a Christian moral theory. Aquinas changes the final telos of human life from Aristotle's eudaimonia to the Christian imago Dei. The purpose of life is to fulfill our final cause, which is to live in the image that our Creator has designed for us. Natural law is therefore a normative theory, as it tells us what we ought to do in order to fulfill our natural law. It is also a deontological theory, because in reality, the Catholic Church issues a set of absolute unbreakable laws, which all must follow. I believe natural law is deeply flawed as a method for moral decision-making, because if you read the Bible and follow scriptural commandments, natural law is not even necessary. This is because Scripture presents revealed law in the form of commandments, which do not require reason and therefore are more reliable than natural law. According to Aquinas, all humans, in order to reach the Imago Dei, should fulfill the principle of synderesis. This is to do good and avoid evil. In order to do this, we must first fulfill our primary precepts, which are worship God, live in an orderly society, reproduce, learn, and defend the self and the innocents. In order to fulfill primary precepts, we must work out secondary precepts, which are known as principles of action. This is a process known as casuistry. Therefore, in order to fulfill the primary precept reproduce, we must not wear condoms. Condoms prevent reproduction. The final cause of sexual intimacy should be reproduction, not pleasure. In order to make this decision, we must first decide to chase the real good of reproduction rather than the apparent good of sexual pleasure. We make this decision by reasoning correctly. We reason correctly by following the virtues and avoiding the vices. For example, if we followed the vice of lust, we would not be fulfilling our natural law, as we would wish to use a condom before marriage. If we followed the virtue of temperance or self-control, we would be fulfilling our natural law. The strength of natural law is that it is adaptable and flexible to different times. So this is a critic that we haven't looked at yet, but I'll introduce now. It's a guy called John Finnis. And John Finnis is a modern philosopher who thinks that natural law is a really good theory for today. So people have different ideas about what is natural, and this means that the theory can change relative to different cultures. John Finnis adapted Aquinas' idea of natural law. He believed we need integral human fulfillment. This means we must complete and fulfill what it means to be human, and our idea of fulfilling being human isn't given by God. So John Finnis adapts the theory to make it not as religious. This means it's a humanistic view which applies to all humans and isn't based on a specific religion, and therefore taking into account all human beings. Therefore, natural law does take into account all people and not just a specific religion, which makes natural law a strong theory for some. So many have criticized natural law because it's just Christian, it's just Catholic, in fact. But what this paragraph is showing is that it's possible to adapt natural law to non-religious belief systems as well. In fact, natural law was non-religious when it was with Cicero and Aquinas and all of the pre-Christians. All natural law relies on is the idea of us having a human nature, and you don't need to believe in God to believe that we all have a distinct human nature. Despite this, it is still my view that natural law is not suited to Christian decision-making. This is because natural law relies on reason, which is no longer necessary, as Christians have revealed law given to them within Scripture. This means there's simply not much need in having a natural law. The Bible clearly shows how we can't even seem to use natural law, which is demonstrated by Adam and Eve when they go against what God tells them. Therefore, natural law isn't even relevant for Christians if we already have revealed law and we seem to be incapable of using our own reason. This is a very short essay. In fact, this wouldn't get a very high mark. This would probably get a CB borderline. And that's because it's a little bit too short and there's not enough critics. Okay, but even still, we're going to go through it because it's good for you to see examples of essays that maybe could do with improvement. So if you added the critics here and had a few more paragraphs, then this would be a better essay and would reach an A. So therefore, in my opinion, I think natural law is not a good method for moral decision making because it seems irrelevant if we already have revealed law from God. In fact, there was no need for natural law in the Garden of Eden because Adam and Eve couldn't even follow it and required other tiers of law after the fall of grace. Some may disagree with me and say that natural law does provide a clear system telling us how to formulate moral decisions. However, I think that they are wrong because there is no need for natural law when Christians have revealed law. Okay, so as I've said, it's not the best essay, it could be improved. And that finishes off natural law. I hope you've enjoyed it. Next week we'll be looking at our second Christian ethical system, which is situation ethics.